Welcome to the Johnson Career Services workshop on interview preparation. Our office, JCS, is here to help ECS majors prepare to find an internship. In addition to this workshop, we offer other workshops on technical resumes, job search strategies, and virtual intern fair preparation. Once you've found an internship, we offer courses that you can take to get credit for that internship. Our office has 3 student contacts, and you are assigned to an internship coordinator based on the first letter of your last name. Later in the presentation, I will show you where to find this information on our department's website. Here is our agenda for today. First, we're going to discuss how to prepare for interviews and the different types of questions you might encounter. Then we'll talk about different types of interviews, and I'll show you the interview preparation resources that are available on our website. Let's talk about how to prepare for an interview. First, we suggest that you research the company and the industry for the position that you are applying for. Learn the basics about the company and or their products and services. Be sure that you fully understand what that company does, as you might be asked about it in your interview. It might also be helpful for you to review the company's mission statement and values as well. Next, be sure that you fully understand the job description. Determine what skills are necessary for the position, and do you have those skills? What from your resume is applicable to the required qualifications? You should create stories based on your past experiences that show that you have the right skills for the job. Once you have a good idea of what the company is looking for in a candidate, you should practice, practice, practice. Not being prepared to answer those open ended questions is the number one mistake that most people make in their interviews. Finally, you will likely be invited to ask a few questions of the interviewer at the end, so you should prepare a few meaningful questions to ask, and we'll cover this more in depth later in the presentation. Outside of technical interviews, most interview questions are going to be behavioral questions. Behavioral interview questions are open ended questions that reveal your skills, abilities, and personality. Hiring managers ask these questions because they believe that past behavior is an indicator of future behavior. They're trying to identify whether you'd be a good fit for their company or for this position. A behavioral question is any time that you're asked a question that requires you to think about your experiences. It tells the manager how you handle situations, how you think, or how you act. Not being prepared for common behavioral questions can make your answers seem long-winded, disjointed, and/or unclear. So it's vital to take the time to prepare before an interview to know your answers to the most common behavioral interview questions. Organizations are looking for behavioral based interview answers that most respond to their needs. This could refer to judgment, so your ability to make informed judgments, execution and results, which is your ability to execute a project, a task, or a plan. Communication skills is, of course, your ability to communicate in a clear and logical manner. Teamwork is your ability to handle different personalities. Time management skills is your ability to use your time wisely and plan effectively. And finally, adaptability means your ability to adapt to shifting priorities or new complexities within your job. When practicing your answers to common behavioral questions, think about how you could showcase these skills within stories based on your experiences. Tell me about yourself is the most commonly asked interview question. It's almost always the icebreaker question, so there is no excuse for not being prepared for this question. You might also hear this question referred to as an elevator pitch. We suggest that you give a brief pitch rather than a complete history, and don't just restate exactly what's on your resume. We suggest using the past, present, future formula here. So you'll talk a little bit about your current position. So you want to mention that you're a student or maybe one big accomplishment that you've had recently. You also want to give some background as to your relevant experience. And then to finish, you'll segue into why you want this position and why you would be perfect for the role. Be sure to be brief and limit your responses to professional experiences rather than personal experiences. Here are some examples of common behavioral questions. Give an example of a goal that you reached and tell how you achieved it. Tell me about your proudest professional accomplishment. What is your greatest strength or weakness? Give an example of a time you faced a conflict while working on a team and how did you handle that? Tell me about a time where your responsibilities got overwhelming and what did you do? Or what would your coworkers say about you if we asked them? Later on in the presentation, I will show you where to find a list of more common behavioral questions on our website. Let's talk about how to develop your answers to common behavioral questions. To prepare, you want to reflect on your past experiences and develop stories, whether that's related to your work history, academic or personal projects, student involvement, etc., to describe your experiences that relate to the skills required for the position. One way to organize these stories is to use the STAR method, or STAR. This stands for situation or task, action, and results. For your situation or task, you want to describe the situation that you were in and/or the task that you were trying to complete. Next, you'll describe the action that you took to address that situation or to complete the task. And finally, you'll describe the results. So, what happened in the end and what did you learn from that situation? When developing your stories, the best way to start is by reviewing the job description. Try to discern what skills or competencies are required for that position and how do these requirements relate to the experiences listed on your resume. Again, this can mean your classes, academic projects, student involvement, or your work experiences. You should develop your stories based on those experiences and frame them within the situation action results methodology. Preparing in this way will help you to stay on track and avoid tangents. Another similar methodology that we recommend to help you effectively answer behavioral questions is what we call experience plus learn equals grow. For the experience, outline an experience that shows that you can do what they're asking you to do in this role based on the job description. Next, you'll talk about what you learned from that experience. How did it make you smarter? How did it make you better at your job? Finally, you'll explain how you grew and how you'll use that experience to your advantage going forward. What would you do in a similar situation next time? Using these methodologies to answer behavioral interview questions will give the hiring manager the insight that he or she needs to determine if you are the right fit for the job. Now, let's talk about technical questions. In any interview, you should be prepared to answer technical questions, and these can be in the form of three different question types: quizzes, experience questions, and hypotheticals. Quizzes are specific questions about specific technologies or about general concepts in your field, and these questions could vary a lot. Remember, this is not an adversarial situation. The interviewer does want to see you succeed. You do want to avoid a dead end here. Remember that the goal is to keep the conversation going. If you're asked about a concept where maybe you've heard of that concept but you aren't very familiar with it, it is a good idea to talk about concepts that you are familiar with but that are perhaps adjacent to the concept that they're asking you about. It can also be helpful to admit that you don't know that particular concept, but you do know other related concepts. Remember, honesty is always important. Never lie to an interviewer about your experiences or your qualifications. For experience questions, you might be asked to talk about a particular project or a particular job from start to finish. Our advice here is to avoid telling about projects where everything went perfectly because this is unlikely to happen in the real world and it doesn't tell them anything about your ability to adapt. Talking about a project that had problems is closer to reality. It shows humility and your ability to adapt. You can go into detail about how you noticed the problems, how you fixed them, and how you would approach a similar problem now. The last type of technical question you might encounter are hypotheticals. These can be the scary whiteboard or pen and paper test where you're asked to work through a problem or write lines of code in the interview. The goal here is for you to show your step by step process for solving the problem. The interviewer wants to see how you would handle a problem if you were hired. Another tip here, reiterating the problem for clarity gives you some time to think. They want to see good problem solving, proposing possible solutions, being adaptive, and double checking your work, even if you ultimately do not get the right answer to the question. Some common pitfalls when answering technical questions: not describing the solution while you're writing it, being silent if you're stuck. If you do get stuck, be sure to describe to the interviewer what you are thinking. Next, not making sure your solution works correctly. You should always double check your work. And then remember, even if you are not a computer science or software engineering major, you should still be prepared to speak about or work with basic coding skills. When going into an interview, watch out for inappropriate interview questions. These could be asked in a way that seem legitimate, but they have no relation to the job requirements, and it's actually illegal to ask about any of the following: race, religion, living situations, gender, age, national origin or birthplace, whether or not you have a disability, and any questions relating to family, so marital status, whether or not you have children, or if you are currently pregnant. In the US, this personal information is protected in the hiring process, meaning that it cannot be used as the basis to hire or not hire anyone. If you are asked about these things, you do not have to answer. Remember, context is important here. Think about why the interviewer wants to know. Is this a conversational question or is it a direct question? It may be uncomfortable to refuse to answer or to end an inappropriate line of questioning, but if the questions being asked during the interview are indicative of the company's policies, you might be better finding out during the interview stage versus after you receive an offer. Sometimes the interviewer might ask an inappropriate question accidentally, and in that case, you might choose to answer them politely if you would like to do so, or if you feel comfortable doing so. If you do answer, try to avoid the substance of the question, but address the intent. Let's talk a little bit about compensation and salary. Going into an interview, you should be aware that it's not appropriate to ask about salary or benefits in any interview, only after you've received an offer for the position. If you are asked a direct question about salary or benefits, for example, what are you looking for? You can just answer something like, I would like a salary commensurate with the responsibilities of the position. If they ask more directly, for example, would you take X amount? You can just say something like, I would consider it. You are not obligated to commit to any particular salary or benefits arrangement in the interview stage. At the end of the interview, the interviewer may ask you if you have any questions for them. Not asking any questions at this stage in the interview could indicate to the employer that you're not as interested in the role, so it is a good idea to have at least a few questions in mind prepared in advance before you go to the interview. This is your chance to ask about things that were not covered already in the interview, and you can ask about anything that you might want to know about the role, the team, or the company. We do have a few examples here on the screen, such as what is the company and team culture like? What attributes does someone need in order to be successful in this position? Is there or what is the career path for an intern within this company? And what are the next steps in the interview process? Again, you should never ask about salary or benefits in an interview, but otherwise you are free to ask about anything that you might want to know. Let's talk about some common interview pitfalls for behavioral questions. Not taking the time to think about the problem before answering, not asking clarification questions. If you don't understand why they're asking the question or what information they are trying to verify, it's fine to ask for clarification. The next is not being specific enough in your answers or not answering the question fully, or rambling due to not being prepared for common behavioral questions. The best way to avoid any of these problems is by practicing your answers to common interview questions before you go to the interview. If you have enough time, it is a good idea to practice as much as you can. Now, let's talk about the different types of interviews and some tips on how to prepare for them. Remember that it's important to make a good first impression. Hiring decisions are often made in the first few minutes of the interview. You should be punctual. Too early is presumptuous, but late is unacceptable. Be considerate of their time and aim to be 5 to 10 minutes early. Be polite. The interview begins when you step on site, not when you start talking. It's important to be polite to every single person that you encounter at the company. Monitor your mannerisms and body language to be friendly and welcoming. Behave as a guest would with respect and enthusiasm. And remember, anyone you encounter could be asked to give input on a new hire prospect, so be courteous to every single person that you meet. Let's talk about how to prepare for an in person interview. You should dress professionally whenever you go to an interview. This means dress modestly, be well groomed, and exhibit good hygiene. Even if your office has a casual dress code, your interview is your first impression and professional dress is still required. Good hygiene is, of course, vital in everyday life, but especially for an interview. Be sure that you have reliable transportation and plan to arrive a few minutes early. You'll also want to bring a few copies of your resume, even if you've already submitted it online. At the end of the interview, you should ask for the interviewer's business card or at the very least their full name and a way to contact them afterward. And you should bring a notepad to take notes. You should feel comfortable to take notes of what they say, and you want to be prepared in case you need scratch paper for working on technical questions. Now, let's talk about preparing for phone interviews. You should factor in worst case scenarios and prepare in advance to prevent technical failures. You want to find a quiet, comfortable, and convenient place to do your interview. Choose a spot in advance. Look for a place with minimal foot traffic, no interruptions, and near an outlet just in case you need to charge your phone. Again, you should be prepared for the interview at least 5 to 10 minutes before it is set to begin. You should have impeccable manners and know how to make small talk, and you want to listen carefully. Make sure that there's excitement in your voice when you speak, but remember to speak slowly. If the interviewer interrupts you at any point during the phone call, stop talking and let them finish before you resume. If they are doing this, they could be dealing with technical difficulties or they're trying to refocus the conversation. Finally, you should dress the part. Don't wear your pajamas for a phone interview, even though they can't see you. You should still dress as you would for an in person interview. Dressing the part will add to your confidence. For virtual interviews, you should choose a spot where you can control your surroundings. You want to minimize interruptions, but take them in stride if they happen. Address it rather than trying to talk over it. Or if there's a high chance that an interruption could happen during the interview, it's a good idea to mention it at the very start. Use natural light from a window and face your lighting source, but be sure to check for a glare, especially if you are wearing eyeglasses or jewelry. Place your camera straight ahead of you, not to the side. If you do have to use your phone for a virtual interview, prop it up to the correct height and angle using books. You want to clear your space of everything except for a copy of your resume, something to take notes with, and a glass of water if you want one. It's a good idea to practice with a family member or a friend to test your audio, your lighting, check for distractions, and monitor your body language or your gestures. You want to choose a simple background with no distractions, and it's a good idea to use a headset to help prevent echoes. You want to make sure to sit so that your head and shoulders are visible on the screen. Sit so that about 10 to 20% of the screen is visible above your head. Don't lean into the camera, but be sure to smile and nod to show that you're listening. And again, you should dress professionally, just as you would for an in person interview. A few other tips for virtual interviews: log on ahead of time to get a feel for how the software works and to make sure that you're able to connect. Check your lighting, check your chair height, and ensure a clean and clear background. Avoid a wireless connection if possible so that you don't have technical issues during the interview. Sit up straight in your chair and be aware of the pace and volume of your voice. Look into the camera to simulate eye contact and avoid the tendency to focus on yourself on the computer screen. You want to adjust your camera to eye level. It shouldn't appear that you're looking up or down at the camera. Let's discuss on demand video interviews and assessments. These types of interviews involve the company sending you a series of interview questions and an email invitation where you will use software to record yourself answering the questions. This will be a one sided interview, meaning that there is not another person on the other side of the interview talking to you in real time. Before you start the interview, it's a good idea to record yourself for practice. Check your timing and check how you appear and sound on camera. You should carefully listen to the questions provided and be sure to address every single question that is asked. Finally, do not procrastinate with this type of interview. You want to complete the assessment as soon as possible, as other candidates might have also received the same request and are recording their interviews as well. After the interview, you should always send a thank you note to every single person that you interviewed with. This is your last chance to make a positive impression and express your interest for the role. A handwritten note is a really nice touch if you can manage it, but sending an email will also suffice. Wrapping up, be courteous and professional throughout the interviewing process. You should rest appropriately the night before your interview, and you should dress appropriately for the interview itself. Be punctual, and remember if it's on your resume, it's fair game for any interview question. So always be honest. Do not overqualify or underqualify yourself, and remember to be enthusiastic and positive. A few other tips here. When describing the action that you took, you should avoid using the word we. Instead, focus on your involvement and use I statements in your answers. After you answer a question, pause and wait. You want to give the interviewer time to think and take notes. Think about the interview as a way to build a relationship and start a meaningful conversation versus just having the interview be a one-way street where the interviewer is the only one asking questions and you are just simply responding. Again, remember that the interview ends when you are off the premises, not when you actually stop talking. And remember to follow up with after the interview with a thank you note. Next, we're going to go over a few of the resources on the JCS website. The easiest way to find our department's website is to go to utdallas.edu and search for JCS. Click on the first result that appears here, and this will take you to our homepage. On the right-hand side of the page here in the green box, you will find the names and contact information for all three of our internship coordinators. If you are interested in attending any of the other workshops that are offered by our department, you can find the schedule for those here. As you scroll down the page, you'll see a list of internship search resources. Here, you can find our resume tips and samples packet, as well as our guide on writing cover letters. If you have any questions on what is appropriate to wear to an interview, I recommend that you review our professional business attire guide here. Further down the page, you will find our interviewing section. Here you can find our 10 rules of interviewing, a list of 60 commonly asked interview questions, a guide on giving your elevator pitch, as well as more information on mastering common interview questions and interview preparation. Okay, thank you for attending the JCS interview preparation workshop. If you have any questions or need assistance with your internship search, please do not hesitate to contact your internship coordinator. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.